So that's all great, but what happens if I create a new meeting and get rid of the title and then send this request? After sending this, I still get a response, but notice that I have this null value here at the title field. This of course is the case because I did not supply a title. However, the biggest issue here is not that the response shows me null, but that if that were a real application, we might have tried to create a database entry with an empty title or with no title, or in the worst case, we might not only have tried that, we may have been successful, and that certainly shouldn't happen. So this clearly is a case for validation. But do we really need it? Can't we trust our users? No, we really can't, because we have different user profiles. We might have the geek. The geek is an expert. He reads all the documentation and he never forgets anything. Therefore, all the data we receive by the geek is complete and without any errors. We don't receive invalid email addresses or anything like that. If we only had the geek, we wouldn't need validation because we would never receive wrong data and therefore our control action could never fail. However, we not only have the geek, we also have the hacker. Now the hacker is kind of the opposite. The hacker tries to test our application. The hacker will deliberately pass wrong or incomplete data to see what happens. And we certainly have to defend against that. And we don't want our application to crash or to store wrong data just because some wrong data is sent. However, in most cases, we neither have the geek nor the hacker. Instead, we have the normal one, and that's you and me. And from time to time, we forget to pass the @ in the email address, or we have a typo. And of course, a good application should handle such a case. And therefore, we need validation to make sure we're only working with data which has the format and the structure we need it to have. Therefore, our controller no longer looks planned, but instead we have our real controller duties for a real-life application. And in such a controller action, before we do anything with the data, and that includes extracting it, we validate it. And Laravel helps us a lot here, because Laravel has a built-in validator which covers all the basic file formats or data formats we might want to validate in our application. Now, for example, file formats or data formats like XML are not supported out of the box, and we would have to write our own validators here or install some third-party plugins. But JSON encoded data can be handled with the Laravel default validator, and this is a great addition and help. So how does validation then work in Laravel? In the controller action which gets the request object injected, we can simply use the validate method on the controller itself. So each controller extending Laravel's base controller has this validate method built in. Now this validate method takes two arguments. The first argument is the data, the request which should be validated. And the second argument specifies which fields should be validated and which rules should be used for validation. So the keys define the fields and the values define the rules. So for example, here where we have a post, if this post has a title and we want to make sure that this title is provided, we would use the required rule, and we can also chain multiple rules by using the pipe separator. So for example here, we might also specify a maximum length of this title, and as you can see, some rules take input or take an argument. Such an argument is provided by using or specifying a colon followed by the value which should be passed into this rule, like 120 in this case, to set the maximum length to 120 characters. Now with this validator, you could also check the file type of a file by using the MIMES rule and then passing the accepted file types separated by commas. Now maybe you're wondering how you could validate GET requests or any requests receiving the data in the URL. Well, there is no need to validate these requests, because if you think about it, if the data is left out, then the URL wouldn't be reached anyway. And if the data is provided, but for example, we want to retrieve a post by an ID which doesn't exist, well then the select action accessing the database will just return that no meeting was found, so nothing bad happens here. This leads to the question, which validation rules Laravel offers out of the box? And the answer can be found in the official Laravel documentation. And of course you will find a link to this page in the materials provided with this module. So as you can see, these are quite a lot of rules, and these rules should really cover the majority of cases you need in your application. Now, what happens if a rule is violated? What do we have to do then? The easy answer is nothing. Laravel automatically detects if the right headers are set. That is why we had to set them with Postman. If the request was sent as an AJAX request, so an XML HTTP request, and if this is the case, Laravel will automatically reply with a JSON object which holds the appropriate error messages. So nothing more to do for the creator of the service besides throwing in this validate method and let Laravel do the rest.